Well, welcome, guys. Zach, I'm just going to let you, I'll talk a little bit and I'll let you kind of fill in where we want to go with
Sure.
this, with my nice, horribly put together slideshow. So it'll just be a lot of talking, guys, but do have some things to look at here, I guess. So Theta Farm Thursday, going to be going over just some basic stuff here with some position sizing, managing your account, things like that, and how to scale up. Let me get my ugly face out of the way. There we go. Cool. Sweet. Well, I'll dive into this, and then Zach, if you want to fill anything in, go ahead. But mostly looking at defining our targets, whether that's a monthly or weekly income goal, translate to dollars per position, and set risk budget. So this is kind of what you see guys or gals are aiming for, like 2% a month, 3% a month, 1.5% per month. That's just kind of setting a target. I don't know. What do you aim for, Zach?
Um, so this is gonna sound really crazy. But last year in 2025, which felt like a long time ago now and completely different, um, a lot of people would look down on this, but I was commonly achieving between 2 and 5% per week in options premium, uh, which that sounds bananas, especially with how bloody things have been. Now, all that said, though, I had to temper that down a little bit. In November, December, and January, it has been the opposite. It has been very bloody. And so I am taking a lot of safety trades. As I mentioned today, I'm trying to get out of leverage names. As great as that was wheeling those last year, that's really just not been fun at all in 2026. Um, so nowadays, like, I would say in January, I do want to try to hit at least 1% a week. If I can in premiums, it still feels achievable. But I still have a whole lot of like really, really boring safety trades open that are really or bag holding uh, stuff that has kept me from getting a higher amount per week. So
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I haven't been doing a lot of those leverage tickers, but I know I did ape into some of that MTSU stuff with you and Lion, and I did close out of those this morning for a small loss. I'm not liking the trajectory of what's going on with some of that stuff.
no, it feels like poison to have it in the portfolio. Now um I'm I'm totally fine with having stuff in the portfolio that is down. I have plenty of stuff that I wish wasn't in the portfolio that's down, but I'm not in a hurry to get rid of it because it's not just sitting there dying and dying and untethering and untethering like some of those names like HIMZ or CONL, where it's like you know Coinbase or HIMS, they have their own problems to deal with. Boy, those leveraged versions, how much worse? If they're dying twice as fast and worse, it just feels like you're holding on to poison. So good to clear out of that stuff. Not fun to rip the band-aid off, but I think the right thing to do and a healthy thing to do. So
Absolutely. Yeah, just kind of has to be done at some point. But getting back to this, my rule of thumb is like what I like to tell people is define your target. It's going to be very a personal target. There's no right or wrong answer. I just had a post on X the other day asking various people about their targets, and I heard various things, like some crazy numbers, like 6, 7, 8% per month targets, which it's always great to shoot for the moon, but just got to stick with reality. I generally am telling people 1 to 3%. Do we have those 6% months? Absolutely. Um, Heck, I've seen all the way up to 10% months with just premiums. It just really depends, but 1 to 3% over the long run. Remember, it's a long journey. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So that's kind of bad with that defining your target. can kind of move on here with stacking positions. And I think Zach probably has some really good stuff with this because he's a hardcore wheeler. He's really just going for premium. Zach, you want to cover anything here?
Well, I think you know the thing to mention with this that was on my mind with you're bringing this up earlier today privately was you know just because you're wheeling doesn't mean you should get away from diversification. And um I like what Lion says, and he try to have a top 10 or top 15 if you can. That way you can get to know those names really, really well. Know how their earnings usually go. Know what to look out for and that kind of thing. If you're just wheeling everything under the sun because it has great premiums or because it's the biggest name in headlines today or whatever, you're kind of setting yourself up for failure potentially because, and it could work out for a while, but you might not know the warning signs to look out for or the weaknesses or potential dangers and things like that. But I think if you only have just one or two things, like for example, I had a friend of mine who she saw me posting, once or twice a week, all of my open options positions, and she knew I did very well last year with options. Our portfolio did very, very well, and so she knew that, and she decided, well, I'm going to look at all of his options trades and see which one makes the most money. Oh, it's MSTU. So they set their whole account to, to wheel MSTU only. So you can see where that went wrong. MS MicroStrategy in general has had plenty of problems, but then MSTU, how much more? I mean, that thing's just been on a death spiral, dumpster fire, for what? I don't know, half a year now. I don't know. So they ended up having to rip the band-aid off, and another friend did something very similar, had to rip the band-aid off, and so we're talking like tens of thousands of dollars losses per account. So anyways, but if that was only one of their positions, maybe like 1/10 of their portfolio, if 1/10 of your portfolio is a dumpster fire, you can go ahead and amputate it and get it back on track. Not revenge trade and not go crazy, but say, okay, let's replace that with something healthy, right? And so, anyways, I'll stop preaching to the choir here. You guys are probably all already on board with this, but that stuff's on my mind quite a bit even today. So,
Yeah, yeah, I like that way to think about it for sure. Um, I think that covers this slide pretty well here. Just wanted to throw out there, if you guys have questions, we'll do some quick questions at the end. This is going to be a kind of a quicker session today. But if anything comes up as we're going over stuff, throw them in the chat. But then, yeah, we can keep some of the larger questions at the end, or if anyone wants to hop on and talk at the end, I'm cool with that as well. Um, Moving on, position sizing. This is going to really vary depending on you as a trader, um, kind of what you're looking at. I kind of just I don't do the math on this myself personally. It's more of just I know how much money I'm managing and I know how much sizing I should be doing per trade. And I think that's something that just comes with experience. Starting out, you can run the math on it more, but typically anything over 5% total account size is probably going to be a little bit aggressive. It's also going to kind of depend on if you're just using cash or if you're using margin as well. Zach, you got any input on that?
um, I mean, I really generally try to avoid margin. In fact, I was really enjoying last year no margin accounts at all for quite a while. However, Lion ended up persuading me to get into strangles a bit, and with that, those do require margin enabled or other requirements as well. Um, but uh, so I do have that on, I think, three of the accounts that I'm managing. But boy, it does feel nice to not have it turned on at all. Because if you do get into margin and start to use it. I mean, it can be great, but it is like taking a loan out and using that and hoping that it works out. And it probably will. if you know what you're doing, but there is that chance that it doesn't. So I generally try to avoid using margin. So
Yeah, I'm the same way. I think I'm only using margin in one of my accounts right now. Most of them, and it's not much, and it's really low risk delta selling puts pretty much is all I'm doing with it.
yeah.
But yeah, definitely wouldn't recommend it if you're beginning. But yeah. This slide I put together, this is pretty general knowledge just based off of if you have any idea about risk versus return in anything in life. Um, Not a lot to talk about here. Just make sure you're setting your own risk rules, whether that's a certain delta value or if you're avoiding earnings or other binary events, things like that. That's really all I have to say with that. And can continue on here and we can talk a little bit about strategies. Uh, Obviously, if you're wheeling, it's going to be a lot of cash secured puts and covered calls. If anyone here does not know what a cash secured put is or a covered call, please say something in the chat and I can give you a basic definition. But I'm just going to assume if you're here, you know what that is. And Zach, you want to talk a little bit about strangles and spreads?
Yeah. So before I got into hardcore wheeling, like strict wheeling with just cash secured puts and covered calls, the thing that I was pretty big on for a little bit before that was spreads, whether they were buying spreads or selling spreads. So that's a combination of two options on the same name at the same time, and so that that was working fantastic until it wasn't, and that when you lose, you could lose pretty bad with those. So I was trying zero DTE, SPX spreads, selling spreads or buying spreads. And you would think you're on top of the world when you win, 25 days in a row. But boy, the 26th day, at least for me, boy, that can really get you and really mangle you pretty bad. So it kind of wipes out your losses, and boy, the whole time it's just uber stressful. At least for me, doing that kind of thing. So I personally don't do spreads. However, I also know traders that have way bigger accounts than I do, and they love them. So hey, who am I? But so just sharing my opinion on that. But so I set that down when I realized how much I love just strict wheeling and the how secure that can be and how you can actually sleep through the night and not have to check your phone 20 times a night and that kind of stuff. Um, but and as well as I did with just strict wheeling last year, as mentioned, Lion got me into strangles a bit later in the year last year, and those have been pretty good. The general gist of strangles would be, hey, wheeling is a neutral to bullish strategy. Strangles are a neutral period strategy. So if you don't really expect everything to be, maybe you aren't such a perma bull, but you're not necessarily a straight up bear either. Well, strangles can be pretty good, and for the most part, they have been. But they can have their challenges too, just like anything else. But you're essentially selling a call and you're selling a put on the same name at the same time. So you obviously want the price action to stay in between those two, so you can sit there and drink in that theta as time goes on. There are a lot of intricacies and details to strangles. I would say even more than to just strict wheeling. So it's not for probably not a beginner's strategy. I would say at least intermediate or maybe advanced strategy. So has its strengths and weaknesses like anything else, but is a little bit more neutral here. So I'll stop myself from talking about strangles, but I feel like I could talk about them for like 15 minutes here. But if
Yeah,
anybody has
yeah.
any questions on them, go for it. So
Yeah, I'll give you a question on them just because I
yeah.
know others might have a question about them, and then we can move on just so we can get through everything and the time constraints today. But
Mhm.
um, for the strangles, those are naked calls essentially, right?
Well, so there's naked call strangles, and then there's covered call strangles. And um, if you are using um, to do a strangle without owning the shares, yeah, that would just be like a short strangle or a naked strangle. Whereas if you have those shares, that'd be considered a covered strangle. So, um, in an example, maybe you're liking N phase at the moment for whatever reason, ENPH, and you thought, well, I don't think the thing is going to fall all the way down to um, I don't think the thing is going to fall all the way down to 30. I also don't think the thing is going to go anywhere near 50. So I'm going to create that as my big highway. Sell a 30 put and sell a 50 call and sit there and drink in the time decay. And just kind of let the thing make some money while I do nothing. And as long as the thing doesn't rip in either direction, we're good. In fact, if it rips down, I'm okay with buying those shares at 30 because that's a darn good deal. If the thing starts ripping toward 50 for some crazy reason, well, there's about 5 different ways to manage it if that happens. So going on a little bit of a rabbit trail there. Sorry, Hertzy, but I hope that answers that question. It
No,
could
you're
go
good.
could go either way is the short answer. So
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. No, that's a really good explanation of those. See, when I've done a lot of strangles in the past, they've all been covered. So
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
just wanted to hear a little bit about the more of the naked strategy. I don't even know if
Yeah,
Robinhood lets you do, because I know I haven't done any in my challenge account. I'm trying to
right.
think. I
Yeah,
don't think
Robinhood
Robinhood
does
even
not
lets
allow
you.
you. They really don't.
Okay.
And so, when recently I was reviewing, Charles Schwab and considering what are other strong options, no pun intended, just in case wanting to, move away from Charles Schwab. Um, Robinhood appealed for different reasons. So did Fidelity. However, Robinhood does not allow you to do naked strangles, so that could potentially be the deal breaker there. They have other great incentives, though. I generally think it's a strong platform, but that and their customer support, I think, were the two things that made not want to really move forward with anything at least yet. But I will say this, sometimes you start with a naked strangle, and like I was telling Lion earlier today, I was complaining about, sometimes I will make them a covered strangle because I get so nervous that something is ripping, like in the case of ENPH. Oh my gosh, you're selling a 43 call, and that price action went from you know 33 to 40 in a day or two. Oh my gosh, what the heck? What happened there? And then now it's starting to creep up on 43, and so in that case recently, and I've done this about 3 times in the last month or so now, buying shares to make it covered. But there are problems with that too. And so all of a sudden you're buying tons of shares of something, and that can be really expensive. And what happens if the thing just decides to fall back down on you, like it has with the end phase here? Then all of a sudden you're like, oh, now okay, now we're down thousands of dollars. Okay, um, so it's not quite the walk in the park as I think some folks would like them to be. Sense to sense, cool. Thanks for chiming in. Yeah, I'm doing one on Palantir right now as well. UNH I'm not messing with right now, but I don't blame you. And if you are doing strangles, it is really good to honestly. I feel like the pros try to stick to names that aren't going to go bananas constantly, like Rocket Lab. I love for cash secured puts. I don't know that I love it as much for strangles. It hasn't been a problem, but I would say it's kind of roller coastery and can really do some moonshots. So that
Yeah, I
one,
would say absolutely not for that one.
yeah, that one's not an obvious. That would not be an easy pick there. But I love it for cash secured puts, though. High premiums and good name and everything. So, anyways, I'll stop yapping about this, but
Yeah, absolutely. All good stuff there. Just moving on here. Income ladder, just kind of thinking once you start getting a hang of your strategies, depends on what you're doing. targeting weekly expiration, some longer date stuff, staggering your days till expiration date staggering is a really big strategy once you start really getting into the wheeling and dealing and you're making a lot of trades, just so you can continuously get that theta decay over the long time frames. Zach, you got anything to add on that? I know that's just kind of some pretty simple philosophy there.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, the only thing that comes to mind that to mention is, in 2025, I loved being a weeklies guy, and unless I had no choice, I was pretty much selling about 7 to 10 days out on anything, and I really just tried to aim for at least 2% return on investment, in terms of the premiums that would be received in that time. It didn't work every time, and there was plenty of times something went wrong or whatever. But overall in 2025, that was a fantastic approach. Worked really well for me. But as I get into strangles and things like that, going for the weekly goal is that's just not something you do. A lot of times you're with your strangles, you might do a leap or maybe a half year out with your cash secured put, but then the sold calls, you're usually doing like a month or two out, maybe a little bit longer. um and it's good, but it's way different, and it's a lot harder. There's a lot more math involved all of a sudden to calculating, wait, how much money am I actually making? Is it worth the risk, and that kind of thing. And so part of me just really honestly secretly wishes I could just go back to strict wheeling, strictly weeklies, aim for at least 2% back, return on investment on any of my cash secured puts. Sometimes you're going to get assigned, and that's okay. And, but there's a reason, there's a reason why I've mixed in strangles, and it's as we get into months or quarters like this, one the ones that we're in right now, like, yeah, I don't necessarily feel as bullish, and I could see things continuing to take damage, and that is where I could see strangles making a little bit more sense, or at least more of a neutral outlook making more sense. So yeah, it makes sense to have the safety trades. Yeah, it makes sense to have some neutral plays as well, not just bullish plays. So
Absolutely, absolutely. Talk a little bit about this management rules. A lot of these, as we say the word rule, it's not a hard rule across the board. You got to come up with these on your own and what fits your trading style. So my management rules are probably going to vary a lot different from Zach's, a lot different from Sense 2 Cents, Sam's, and anyone else in here. Works, I saw is in here. Um, anyways, long story short, you're going to have your own rules. Whether that's 50%, whether that's 80%, you're looking for realized premiums. And then there's always that decision of if you roll versus close. Zach, just knowing a little bit about his trading style, is a big roll guy. You see him uh, roll and repeats, or what do you call him, Zach?
oh yeah, I just say
Lock and roll?
lock and roll. Yeah, I think I'm just too lazy to type out locking in 50% gains, rolling out another week. And a lot of times that's what I'm doing. Okay, I just set if it, what I do in the morning is, and kind of throughout the day, depending on my day, but I'll look at all the positions I have open, and usually it's over 100 trades, not even options, but like quite a bit. And so I'll go through. If anything looks like it might potentially hit 50% today, I'll go ahead and place a limit order to close it out at 50%. That way I don't have to sit there and stare at my phone all day long. And then as soon as the thing goes off, okay, lock and roll. Okay, so close out the 50% winner, open another one for the next week, unless the outlook has changed for something on that ticker. But
Yeah, absolutely. I just know every time something in my head just says rock and roll. It's
yeah, I know. I
kind of
feel like I
awesome.
need to have something better to say. I don't even know if it makes sense what I'm saying, probably to some people, but
We should trademark that phrase, rock and roll. That's an option seller's hangout only term from now on.
yeah, yeah. It's like a mix between lock and load and rock and roll. I feel like we need something better than that. I think I just say it out of habit, honestly.
No, no, I think it's great. I think it's great. But anyways, so just this is going to be really personal, whatever you want to set it at. And it might depend on ticker, it might depend on your outlook. I know I was talking to Lion this morning on some of his leap puts, or I call them backstop cash secured puts. Um, he's a percent. I think maybe, yeah, yeah, cents, 2 cents just threw a chat in there. He beat me to it. Notice that line does a lot of leap puts and calls rather than short dated expiration. Pros and cons with that is you simply, like for me, I have TSOL backs. I call them backstop trades. Others might call them leap cash secured puts. It's just whatever you fancy with that. But I think I have mine at like a $14 strike for TSOL for January of 27. And I opened these at the beginning of 2025. So they were almost a 2 year trade out cash secured put, simply thinking that I'm not going to have to look at these for a year and a half, even when it becomes time to manage them. That's the pros and cons with those. Obviously, TSOL is probably a little bit degenerative because it's a 2x leverage fund. But if you're doing something like Amazon, for instance, you could probably go out to 2028 or mid 2027 right now, and I know Amazon's at like 230-ish. I don't know exactly right now, but probably go down to like $120 strike and pick up a decent chunk of change to agree to buy those shares of Amazon a year or two out and just collect that premium up front. If you spit that into a calculator, um, pretty good returns, and it's just less buttons you got to click and manage. But pros and cons to everything. Um, but yeah, Zach, you got any input on that?
Yeah, I'm seeing Sense to Sense has a question on there, and you might already touched on it a little bit, saying that he notices Lion doing a lot of leap puts and calls rather than shorted dated expirations. What are the pros and cons? So, clarification on your question, he actually doesn't like leap calls, usually. I should say leap sold calls. Um, and that is because uh, you can do something like, let's say you're, uh, let's say I'm just going to pick a random ticker like TSLL, okay, because we're talking about that a lot right now anyway. You might think, boy, that thing is never going to hit 30. Well, that may be true for a month or two or whatever, but man, get too much further down the road, something could happen. Uh, all of a sudden Elon Musk is running for president, or all of a sudden Elon Musk creates the first whatever, and out of nowhere that thing starts ripping and ripping, and boy, that position you've been holding onto for like feels like eternity is in a world of hurt. And so those things can be hurting and hurting and just eating up um, buying power or collateral or whatever for quite a while. So he tries to avoid those. So if he's doing a strangle, he'll usually do a month or two or three away for the call side, but the put side he likes to do a leap. Now, doing a leap, sold put, one pro would kind of like Hertzy was just saying, it can be a little bit more set it and forget it than my crazy madman every single week, nonstop trades mode. So it's good savings in terms of number of trades. If you look at how much you're paying in commissions, it could be scary if you're doing weeklies like me. Um, but so there's a couple benefits right there. But another one would be really being choosy about when you're setting that and kind of capturing a really good moment. Almost like if you're taking a photo that's going to last for a long time, take a really good one, right? And it's like, okay, you'll notice that he's doing that on days where it's like, oh gosh, TSOL is not only ultra beaten down, but also has ultra jacked premiums all in the same day. So he's looking for those kinds of opportunities where he can capitalize on that. He likes to sell maybe a cash secured put on something that he'd be happy to own at that price, and also like, man, he's getting fantastic premium because maybe it's right before an earnings event, or like I said, maybe the thing just fell on terrible news. So those are or a combination of all of the above. Those are some of the main reasons, or you know, why and when he'll do it. Um, Gosh, there was another thing I was going to say. Oh, the last thing I was going to say was he's also kind of, if you really talk to him, he loves combing through the options chains on his top 10 and looking for crazy opportunities where some knucklehead out there who probably also buys lots of lottery tickets is happy to buy some crazy puts or crazy calls on a name that will never, ever, ever, it'll never come to pass. Like they might be ultra bearish on Tesla and think it's going to go all the way down to $1 next year, and it's like, and they're willing to spend $500 on those lottery tickets, or something bananas. And so to Lion, those are just like free. That's just free money. And so he'll say, "Oh my gosh, look at this one." So if you talk to him, sometimes he'll point those out, like, "Hey, check this one out. Oh my gosh!" And so he'll try to snatch up like 25 or 50 of those. Some or they think, "Oh, Tesla's going to go to $1,000 next month," or they'll believe, I don't want to say it. They'll believe some big names, I'll say, who make big wild predictions on certain tickers, um, and they're like, "Oh, Bitcoin's going to go to 1 million next month," and it's like, okay, all right, well, I will go ahead and sell you the calls.
Yeah, we've got a term for that. At least I have a term for that, and we could probably have a stage or whatever we want to call these live on
Just
just
those,
that topic. But
yeah.
I call that treasure hunting. That's what
Yeah.
Lion's doing. That's my term.
Mhm.
It's called treasure hunting,
I like it. I like it.
and those are fun for sure.
Those are fun. Yeah, and he'll they might not pay a fortune, but he'll do them in quantity. So you might see him bust out 50 or 100 of those, and that can work if you've negotiated down with your brokerage the amount you're paying in terms of commissions per options contract. So that's a whole other
Yep,
topic. But
yep. Uh, Cents 2 cents. What does Lion mean with 1 to 1? Is that even? I believe, yeah. Zach, you might be able to fill that in, but I believe that 1 to 1 means it's an even amount. What's the calls?
it is. So names like I'll just say PayPal. Today Lion was saying, "Hey, we should be 1 to 1 on this right now." In other words, we're not more bullish right now on PayPal at all. Versus other names, like if he was, I think he does have some Palantir open, or I'm trying to think of another name. He doesn't have any Rocket Lab, but names are, that he has more of a bullish outlook on the name. He'll usually go 2 to 1, selling at least two cash secured puts just to one naked call, so that it's a little bit more ready for if things go ripping than just kind of somewhere in the middle. So, and then your next question there, you're saying, is that a form of delta or neutral positioning? He does aim to be delta neutral, um, definitely, and have a really big, his term, highway. Um, in other words, like runway for the price action between the call side and the put side. So
Yeah.
no, don't worry about asking too many
And
questions. That's what this is for. So.
yeah, this is all about questions, and I know today we're just talking more basics about portfolio build outs and whatnot, but in the future when Lion can get on, I'm sure he would love to chat about his crazy strategies, lizard, iron butterfly, whatever the hell's going on. But anyways, continuing on, yeah, if you guys got questions, I'm in the chat for sure. Those are all great questions. So, but yeah, like example portfolio, let's just keep it even. If we've got $100,000 portfolio, set your targets. Let's just say 1 to 3% for just a realistic example of a monthly premium target we're looking for. So that's going to be $1,000 to $3,000 that we're trying to realize in premiums that month. It's a pretty wide runway, as you can see, but a lot of that's going to depend on the macro, micro events, binary events, earnings, and just what the market's doing. Um, we kind of touched on it, but there's going to be months where you're going to probably lose money selling options, and there's going to be months where you're going to make 7, 8%. So we're looking over a long road highway. 1 to 3% is kind of the goal. That's what I aim for. Everyone's a little bit different. And talk about some common mistakes. I know Zach touched on it a lot. I like to preach about it a lot, but don't get too over concentrated. Also, don't spread yourself too thin. So keep a solid like 5 to 10, maybe 15 tickers. Become an expert on how those tickers move, whether it's earnings, different events that they do, things like that. Um, Try not to chase premiums, and then also over leveraging, whether that's with margin or over leveraging into a single ticker. Anything to add on that stuff, Zach? I know that's all
No,
stuff we've kind of chatted about.
I fully agree with you. I will need to hop off in just a couple minutes, so I will try to do that quietly so you can keep going.
Okay.
As much as I'm very much enjoying this, I do have to hop off for something, unfortunately. But
Well, we're right at the end of the slideshow, so really the rest of this will be questions. If you got questions, throw them in there, and then just some closing points. Consistency is always going to beat home runs. Follow your process, write down your process, have your own process, sizing, and then it's all about repetition and being able to stay consistent to your process. Any questions, throw them in the chat. If anyone wants to hop here and talk, raise your hand or throw a question in the chat. Any comments, questions, concerns, anything else you want to look at for today, that's the material we had for you guys for today. If we want to pull up any charts, heat maps, order flow, options chains, anything. Zach, you got anything to add before you hop off?
I just yeah, guys, if you're not used to the user interface of Discord, know that if you are wanting to hop into voice chat, there is a little hand icon, depending on whether you're on desktop or mobile. I should say where it is at would be dependent on what device you're on and whatnot. Um, but click that if you want to hop into voice, and if not, that's perfectly fine. But yeah, Hertzy, really like what you have here. Really like the consistency over home runs approach, and that was a huge blessing to our portfolio last year. And honestly, just want to keep that going. I really love that. I think it's fantastic. You don't have to swing for the fences every time. In fact, I think it's helpful not to. So I'm gonna have to hop off, but I do see that Sam. Hey Sam, thanks for joining. Appreciate you. Uh, has a question. I'm
And
going to
I can
read.
always answer that if you
Oh,
need to
great.
go, Zach. Not a
Yeah.
big
Why
deal.
don't you take that one, and I'm going to have to slip out of here. But guys,
Cool.
great being with you. I really enjoyed this, and if I didn't have to go, I would love to stick around and talk for another hour. Honestly. But have
And
a
we
great
are
day.
recorded today, by the way,
Yep.
Zach. So
Wonderful.
um, this will all be able to view. So, anyways, thanks, Zach.
Thanks, guys. Talk to you later.
See ya.